bank at a point where the river was a formidable expanse, narrowing a little farther down into a faster water chute. With calm waters that afternoon, the vastness of the river didn't appear overwhelming to the active, athletic couple. Around 4:15, Vince and Angelika climbed into their vessels and set off across the river for their mile-and-a-quarter journey. Stupendous views of the Hudson Highlands, delightfully named Storm King Mountain, Breakneck Ridge, and Bull Hill, served as a backdrop and added to the ambiance of their goal, the oft-romanticized 6.5-acre island. The patch of land was dominated by stunning ruins resembling a falling Scottish castle, the remains of a building erected for a far more utilitarian purpose, as a storage facility. The historical significance of this isle near West Point began during the Revolutionary War, when American forces ran a chain across the Hudson in a failed attempt to prevent the passage of British ships up the river. In the late 19th century, Francis Bannerman IV, a Scottish immigrant, collected weapons and ammunition from the Spanish-American War and the Civil War for resale. He stuffed it all into a storeroom in New York City, but did not have the space to safely store the 30 million surplus munitions cartridges he had on hand. With that in mind, he purchased the island in 1901 and began construction of a home and an arsenal, with a sign reading Bannerman's Island Arsenal installed into the west-facing side of the building. Construction ceased in 1918 when Bannerman died. On August 15, 1920, the powder house exploded with enough force to shatter windows in nearby towns and send chunks of rock onto the railroad tracks on shore. New York State bought the property in 1967, cleared out the military merchandise, and conducted tours until an incredibly ferocious fire ripped through the grounds in 1969, causing massive damage to the buildings. The structures were abandoned and neglected until 1995, when a Brooklyn realtor, Neil Kaplan, moved his business to the town of Beacon and began the process of restoring the island. The ruins, on the one hand, remained fragile and precarious, with propped-up walls. The crumbling castle-like warehouse was cracked, pocked with holes, and surrounded by rubble. The former arsenal was overgrown with vines and other vegetation, and its upper floors appeared ready to cave in with the slightest misstep. The gardens, on the other hand, were glorious. Francis Bannerman's wife, Helen, had created a cutting garden, a woodland landscaping, as well as elaborate herb and vegetable patches. Kaplan founded the Bannerman Island Trust, an organization dedicated to preserving the historic island, and directed a true-to-the-period reconstruction of the gardens and its maintenance, with the help of volunteers such as Angelika. Angelika had fallen in love at first sight with the quirky island, the romance of the ruins, and the very presence of a castle in New York. As a native of Europe, she was used to seeing castles all over the place, and finding one here was a surprise that embraced her heart like the comfort of home. Before setting out from Plum Point a little before 5 o'clock that afternoon, Angelika sent a text to Barbara Gottlock, Bannerman's volunteer coordinator, who lived up on a hill within sight of the island. "Hi, Barb. We're kayaking today out of Plum Point, and I'd like to stop on the island since I won't be able to make it there this Wednesday. Please let me know if it's a problem," she wrote. "Otherwise, I'll give you an update on how the geese are doing." They waited a few minutes for a response and passed the time chatting with a fisherman on the shore. As a volunteer, Angelika knew that she wasn't supposed to visit the historic site outside of scheduled gardening hours unless she was in an official tour group. Not willing to wait any longer to hear back from Barbara, she paddled off with Vince, crossing the river to the island with no difficulty. They landed at the harbor near the southeast corner of the island and mounted the steps that led to the residence. Over the next 2 hours, they engaged in physical intimacy as they rambled through the gardens and castle grounds. Angelika posed for provocative photographs in lingerie she'd packed for the trip, and Vince enjoyed the 2 beers he'd brought along. Together, they roamed the island, posing for pictures, checking out the status of the bulbs Angelika